I'd like to give everybody at least a minute to introduce themselves, who they are and what they do. So we'll go ahead and start with Deborah.
Deborah Golden, Chief Innovation Officer at Deloitte. 30 years, 100 years in dog years there, I figure. Lots of background, space engineer background. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for having me again.
Hi, Ben Calderon here. I'm with Samsara. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and responsible for all devices and digitization there. Part of the founding team, and Samsara works in the world of physical operations. So all that infrastructure that is behind the scenes that run cities and all kinds of cool things. So we get to see a lot of different industries. Happy to be here, and a bit about my background. I originally in mechanical engineering, got to work in semiconductors, got to work in consumer electronics, got to work in networking, and for the last 10 and a half years or so in Samsara.
Blake Barber, co-CEO and CTO at Glideways. My background is largely in autonomous systems and robotics. I've done autonomous spacecraft, autonomous aircraft, autonomous ground vehicles, both robotaxis and autonomous long-haul trucking before joining Glideways. At Glideways, we are focused on deploying AI, robotic systems, autonomous systems to solve mass transit applications for cities. So something that allows cities to add scalable urban transportation to reduce congestion and ultimately eliminate congestion in urban areas. So excited to be here and speaking with this great panel.
Hey everybody, long time no see. William Santana Li. I'm a former Ford Motor Company executive. Spent 10 years there, 12 different jobs, 4 different continents, every functional area. Worked on systems, component, vehicle engineering. I'll date myself, I worked on the Lincoln Mark 8, the Escort Tracer team, with the precursor to the Ford Escape. Worked for Ford of India, for Ford of Brazil, was stationed in Ford of Europe for the never-ending turnarounds. Second to last job, Director of Mergers and Acquisitions. Last job, ill-advised. I was an intrapreneur, convinced the board to release $250 million to me to do a roll-up in the used parts industry. I bought 22 companies in 11 months, had about 600 employees, and built the world's second largest automotive recycler that still operates today. It's part of the ticker's LKQ.
Excellent. Well, as I mentioned, this is one of the panels I've been looking forward to, even as a moderator, just because we cut across a range of companies that are here. But when you start to think about what the future looks like, especially when it's physical AI and robotics that are living in these urban environments, we're all going to have to interoperate at different levels. And this cuts across everything from regulatory to data to maybe even ways that we collaborate and do better together things. And so to kind of lead us off, one of the things that comes up a lot is trust in the technology. And is there things that are going to hold back physical AI? Because as we see mobile robots, connected fleets, we need to prove that they can work in these environments and that the public is actually going to be accepting of it. Things are going to be on your sidewalks. Things are going to be on the roadways. How do we get to that point where everybody is going to accept the technology? So regulatory is not the barrier. And we really focus on the engineering and the deployment and scale. And so I figured we'd maybe kick this off, maybe William, even though you just spoke, maybe let's start with you, because Knightscope has been in and around people for a while now. I remember when Knightscope first launched at Stanford Shopping Center. And
we remember you too.
Yeah, that's true, right? We'll get to data in a minute as well. Thoughts on this? Like, how do you build that public trust, especially with a product like yours?
Don't do stupid things, and don't listen to clients who think they are asking a reasonable request. So we work a lot with law enforcement, federal stuff. And there, I don't know how many 3-letter agency people are like, hey, can we put a gun on it? Hey, can we put a machine gun on it? Can we do this, that, and the other things? Like, are you stupid? Like, we want to build a new set of technologies for society to trust? Like, the last thing you need to be doing is tasing somebody. Do you not understand, like, basic market dynamics? And that's one corporate philosophy, is bright red line for us, not arming any of these machines. And so first and foremost, don't do anything stupid.
I like that answer. Other points?
Yeah. Let me add something there. So, I mean, at Samsara, we have these AI-enabled dash cams, right? And so we're putting dash cams in some of the strangest locations where, in the United States, like, if you look at your garbage truck operator, if you look at a long-haul truck, or you look at EMS operators, you look at folks like, there's a lot of trust that we have to build with unions and these labor forces that otherwise are thinking like, hey, I don't want a camera staring at me all day long. I took this job because I love the independence, right? So, and that's a big thing. So what we have to do is really, and there's a bot, and we have to explain how, hey, AI is actually helping you get home every night. AI is going to help you stay awake when you're going across Midland, Texas at 10 p.m. at the end of an 8-hour shift, and you might be tired because you've been doing it 5 days in a row. And so we talk really about what it's going to deliver, what the impact is. We focus on that, and there's a massive human element to that, right? So we fixate on that. We figure out how that benefits them, their families, their communities, and how we can make a safer and more efficient type of operation for them and their coworkers and such. And so if we focus on those things, and then they see the tangible impact, that's great. And so that's when we get that adoption. We get, emails written in saying, hey, Samsara, thank you. Last night I was exhausted. I started swerving off the road. It woke me up. And thanks to you, I got home that night. I got to see my kids, and I'm really happy that device is in my cab.
I might just add on that is actually to focus on the failures. I mean, I mentioned it in my opening there was we love to say we're a failure culture. We're not. But I would actually implore everybody who actually is any position to actually put a failure rate into your goals. So I actually have a failure rate in my job. I have an 8 to 10% failure rate that I'm not succeeding if I'm not failing. And I'm actually gold on that failure rate. I actually don't think we actually look at failure as a true sign of success. And so in your example, if you weren't testing for that failure, did someone actually notice what that failure was doing and why was that failure rate actually happening? So you can prove that it won't happen in a real life scenario. I actually think we've failed at pushing ourselves too hard. And I think in the world of AI, we will need to have more failure rates than success rates, and I just don't think we're willing to push ourselves hard enough.
I think there's a related point there, which is interesting in the context of trust in AI systems. And so I think back to when we were deploying the first on-road AI systems, and Google's self-driving car project early on took Google employees and put them in the car and said, hey, we're going to monitor you with this camera, and we want you to pay attention the entire time, but we're going to let this car drive itself. And very quickly, right, Google's own employees in a car that's they know is actively being monitored, and they've got a Google employee playing a violin and applying makeup. Just a crazy amount of trust in a system way too early, right? So it's easy for these systems to earn trust that they quite frankly don't deserve, which is where, to your point of not doing stupid things, it's incumbent on us as we deploy this to monitor those failures and making sure that we're deploying systems, not only that people will trust because they may trust it too early, but systems that are trustworthy, that really do earn that trust because we've done the rigorous work on our end. We think about deploying vehicles at Glideways in a mass transit, public transit type of environment. The bar for safety is incredibly high. This is at commercial aerospace levels of safety, and we take that very seriously to make sure that we're deploying a system that, of course, people will trust, and they'll probably trust it too early, but that we know it's trustable to levels that go well beyond what can be easily tested because we've been rigorous in our approach.
So this is interesting. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up for this question or maybe a little bit later on. All of us, I think, who build these systems, safety is number one. Because we know that the smallest incident can have a massive impact on your business and the public perception. So I'll mention this one because it happened in the last week. If you haven't kept up with some of the news, Waymo hit a cat. Oh. And so I had to go look. And we have a cat at home. We love him. His name is Pickles. But I looked at the statistics, and depending on who you believe, 15,000 cats get hit every day in the United States by cars on the roadways. One cat gets hit by a Waymo. There is a Facebook page. There's an X page. It's getting elevated by a San Francisco supervisor. One of my favorite comments on this thread was someone posted said, "Is this an SNL sketch?" Right? But the bar for the perfection of robots is very high. And from a public perception perspective, a little incident like this is now getting blown up. Now, over time, regulatory will probably address some more of this. And a lot of us who are building these systems have things like thermal cameras and other things on our vehicles where we would have detected the cat. But when does it become good enough? And our thoughts or reactions, unfortunately, the poor Kit Kat is the name of the cat. We all know, a lot of people know its name now. But when can Waymo accidentally hit a cat and it doesn't become national news? And even for all of us, how does this apply? I'm just wondering if anyone has thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I would say this is the beautiful thing about this being a fully reproducible autonomous system where this event occurs, right? Because as you mentioned, this happens with people all day long, every day, and what's to be done systematically to address that issue. And there's very little to be done, and not only cats, but the number of deaths on roadways is atrocious, and what's to be done, and we continue at those same rates. If you look at commercial aerospace, which now is gold standard in terms of safety on per passenger mile traveled, you could go back to the 1950s or 1960s. This was not the case. But there is a culture around safety there where every safety event, to monitoring our failures, every safety event is publicized throughout the industry and is treated systematically throughout the industry. And this presents the opportunity, right? The fact that it's a big deal when Waymo hits a cat is exactly what we want, because this then gets treated, every failure gets treated systematically across the fleet and then across multiple fleets as multiple people are deploying these systems. And you get this rapid increase in improvement in safety that we saw in commercial aerospace. And now we can see that on our roadways. And so to answer the question, when is it good enough? I mean, the answer is it's never good enough. And that's the point, right? Which is when we have these systems which can be systematically addressed, we can just continue to increase that bar, right? So when is it good enough to deploy now? We've kind of answered that question, at least with on-road autonomous vehicles, is we need to be improving safety over human drivers. And then the promise is, and I think we're seeing it, is that we can then continue to grow that over time, and far fewer cats, far more Kit Kats continue to roam around instead of finding an early sad fate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think everyone would like these to be perfect, but there's going to be degrees of it. I think, at least just speaking from the perspective of autonomous vehicles on the roadways, our goal has always been to be better than the humans. And the margin that we have to be better than the humans is something that I agree with Blake, that we're always trying to go push the limits and go farther with it. But I think it's going to be an evolutionary process for all of us to say, when is it good enough? And I think I agree it's good enough. And to be fair, I will concede Waymo is one of the best actors in this space. They've had an incredibly good safety record. They've been very transparent when things happen. And for those of us who have ridden Waymos in places like San Francisco, it's almost becoming routine now. Where you'll hop in the vehicle the first time and it seems like a new exotic thing that you're doing. And I've given lots of demos in self-driving cars too. And it's really exciting for the first 5 minutes. And then it gets pretty boring really quick because it's just doing its job. And so a lot of us now, we hop in a Waymo and you immediately start using your phone and not even paying attention where you're going because you trust the demo.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting is like, AI, robotics, they have to be like 100x, 1000x better before you get adoption, right? And it's never good enough, right? But if it's so far out there and so much better, then you get attention. And then you get adoption, and people build some comfort with it. But, yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to get in trouble for this one. But everyone's worried about robots and AI, and kind of where I sit, like human behavior is incredibly irrational, irresponsible, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The data says this is better than that, but I'm going to go criticize this thing. I think pre-COVID there was 15,000 accidents per day. Human drivers, and a few robotics companies or autonomous companies have one incident and nationwide news. And all those crimes that I spoke of earlier, was that AI? Was that technology? It was humans that did all this stuff. Everybody's worried about all this technology and AI is coming to kill everybody. I'm like, have you looked at the stats of what the humans are doing? I know maybe that's not a popular thing to say, but you kind of need to look in the mirror a little bit.
And I think on that same line, I mean, I kind of was chuckling when you brought up the kitty cat, but when you think about the cat and whether it's Waymo or any other autonomous vehicle, while I find it interesting that the cat was what was publicized in that, what no one's actually talking about is actually what happens when you're in the car when actually someone comes to actually hijack the car. So we actually are fantasizing more about the animal. By the way, again, I'm an animal lover. But we are fantasizing more about what happens with the animal than actually you're in the car and actually someone comes to actually carjack the car. And again, back to the scenario of what happens if you're a blind passenger when the car gets carjacked. That's actually a more traumatizing scenario to think about than when, unfortunately, a car, a squirrel, a bird, something else actually gets hurt. And so I'm actually more concerned that we're actually not having more striking conversation about actually humanity and other types of issues that we need to be thinking about in autonomous vehicles, because those are actually other issues. You know, there are other issues right now where people are going around and tagging cars, right? So, okay, they're spray painting and they're tagging. The people are getting locked in those cars. And actually, that's the safety feature, by the way. So if you're ever in a car that gets tagged, it just locks you. Okay, maybe not bad if someone's tagging it. Is it bad if actually somebody has a gun and they're on the other side? Maybe that's actually bad because, by the way, they're not bulletproof vehicles. So maybe we should actually be flipping the conversation, and actually there is a conversation to be had about what is a safety protocol versus I need to be flipping my lid every time something actually does happen, because there is a trust factor to be had, and I actually don't believe in the word perfect. I think we're actually creating a false scenario to say anything in the world should be perfect. It's not going to be perfect.
But Deborah, these mistakes all have to happen.
Of course.
You can't build this stuff in a laboratory.
Of course.
All the stuff you're worried about in a conference room, some of the items that you raised, were not in some meeting minutes to go address, right? Until you're actually physically out in the field and get punched in the face, you're not going to know how to fix the issue. And so therefore, more mistakes are, when we had one incident, the insurance company and the lawyers and everybody's crisis teams freaking out or whatever, and they turned to me like, Bill, what's going to happen? I'm like, be prepared. There will be more mistakes. We are not going to stop. We're going to continue. We're going to learn, and we're going to improve. So somehow, weirdly, we're going to have to figure out how to allow the mistakes to occur, I think, to the earlier points, so that we can improve and not thinking, oh, well, we have a proving ground that can, figure out all the edge cases, and we're going to be fine.
But that's what I said, like, you can't accept perfect. There is no perfect. Perfect doesn't exist in this world, and anybody aiming for perfect is a fallacy in and of itself. The cats are going to... We're going to pick on the poor cat, the bird, the emu, whatever, the squirrel, whatever is going to happen. And again, think about those other types of things that are actually going to exist, because perfect is a fallacy. It's not going to exist.
Yeah, and I think we could make a dedicated panel on this one, because I think it's going to be on the perception of this thing and what it is. Because I've been asked this too about the self-driving vehicles at one point. Someone said, like, what happens if a squirrel darts in front of your self-driving vehicle? And point blank, we're going to hit it. Because the alternative to try to swerve and avoid that squirrel, we might hit another vehicle or we might hit a human being. Yes. So I think, and it was mentioned about a framework and what are the policies that are going to be around this. And I think it's going to be evolving, but I also agree with everybody's comments around you're going to have the failures. And we're going to minimize the damage of the failures, but they're all going to be learning opportunities, and it's how we get involved as industries across the board. But let's go ahead and shift gears for a second, because I think humans were mentioned a little bit, or how people do dumb things. And the topic here is about smart cities. And we throw around the term smart cities a lot. So this question is really around, do we actually need smart cities, or do we just need smarter machines? And one of the things when you think about smart cities is, governments talk about this all the time. Smart city initiative, and it means a lot of things to different people. But a lot of the innovation that's happening for a smart city is really coming from private sector. It's companies like ours and others that are here that are trying to push the limits of this. And so the question is, like, do we need centralized planning? How does government start to get involved in this? And does government need to have city planning for how they're going to handle data and intelligence in the cities? Or is it really going to be, networks of smart machines done by private sector that we kind of do this on our own? And so maybe I throw this out to Blake to start it with, because your product really has kind of a public-private intersection if you're doing it well. And so thoughts and opinions on this? Because government's probably somebody you work with quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's. I think there are multiple dimensions to this particular topic. Government has to play a key role here, and there's probably a number of roles the government needs to play. And I think you mentioned this in your address earlier. It's interesting, the type of system that we're deploying, right? So we're deploying autonomous vehicles to deliver mass transit. We won our first project just down the road in San Jose, who's been trying to connect the San Jose airport to transit for decades at this point, and it can't do it with existing solutions. So they funded a study well over a decade ago now and asked, how could we, given current solutions don't scale, how could we apply technology to solve this type of problem? And the solution that was put forward after significant study was a glideways style of solution, which is exactly the type of system that we're implementing. And at that point, at that time, the conclusion that was reached, hundreds of pages of document in, was this is absolutely the type of solution that could scale for urban transportation and deliver these types of systems that we can't currently do. but we cannot recommend to you, San Jose, that you go do this right now because this technology does not exist at this moment in time. It needs to be developed. And it says the right role for government at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, and suggested to government in this study, it says what you should all be doing is pouring money into this because holy cow, if this works, it just solved a huge problem across the board for every city in the United States, and you can take that internationally as well. And so they said it just makes no sense that government is not investing in something that has so much promise to change, to make much needed changes in the world. And so I think this is an area where we talk about what is a smart city. I don't know what a smart city is. I know cities are a lot smarter today than they were 100 years ago, and I know they'll be a lot smarter 100 years from now than they are today. And so I know there's a derivative there in terms of how smart cities are becoming. And with the application of robotic systems, physical AI systems, we expect an inflection point in that curve, that they can get much smarter far more rapidly. And so the time is ripe and the time is now to deploy, right? If you want that to be applied to your problems as a city, you want to motivate that by investing in those things. And hats off and credit to San Jose, who we have a project with, to lean forward and say, hey, we will invest in innovation because there is nothing that will solve our problem. We have to innovate our way out of this problem. And congestion is a problem that's existed for 100 years, right? We are not going to solve this without investing. And so, San Jose is doing this right here in the heart of Silicon Valley. And we need more and more governments at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, to invest and say, hey, innovators are going to deploy this technology to change the way the world works. We want them changing it for us to solve the problems that we have.
I think if I could build on that, I think technologists need to teach. It's not that we need smart cities. We need to make the city council members and the mayors smarter. And these are people that are, their career is public service. They want to do a good job. We as technologists are failing to educate them, give them opportunities to learn, put things in context for them. On the federal side, this summer I did about 36 meetings on Capitol Hill. They're barely understanding the concept of AI, zero concept of robotics or anything autonomous. The basic level of understanding is abysmal. And I think one way to cure the issue is an assignment for Silicon Valley is we need to go out and teach. We need to stop the in Silicon Valley bubble of us talking to each other. And we really need to get out there and invest, literally the word invest the time to sit down with a city council member and have them literally understand what we're trying to do, and then you'll get the aha moment. And I met plenty of mayors and city council members that, if given the information that we have, are rational, logical people trying to do a good service for the community, but sometimes they literally don't have the tools. Back to my tirade on the law enforcement security people don't have the tools. It's the same at the local and state government. The level of knowledge is scary, or lack of.
Yeah, and I think at Samsara we see something similar. We're speaking with the mayors, the city council members, and they're asking us, like, hey, how do I get smarter about this? How do I get smarter about my utilities, my services? How do I fix potholes? Right? And it's such a simple thing because they have constituents. They need to be held accountable. They got to deliver something, right? So if we're finding it's helpful to align with, their desire, what they need to do to deliver their constituents. And so, we're out there on that forefront, just helping them understand what's going on in their own city. So one example is like, say Sacramento, they want to go, they're a customer of ours, and they're like, hey, we're electrifying fleets. We don't know where to put the chargers. We don't even know how to direct people to the chargers. And it turns out charging is a big thing for anything smart, right? Like whether it's autonomous or if it's driven by a human still, they have to figure these things out. So we're helping digitize what's going on for them. We're helping them. We're using AI to say this is where it needs to be, and not only like at a stagnant like route planning at the beginning of the day, end of day, but like real time. And so we're bringing them through this journey. It is like you're kind of trailblazing a bit, but I think there is some positive signs out there that people are looking for the change, they're open to it, and they understand that they have to deliver some things, and everybody's in their journey, right? So some people are early stage in that journey. Other cities are pretty far along, and it's pretty amazing. But pretty soon we'll have that ability to say, hey, there's like these 67 potholes you need to fix today, and here's a route for them, and here's it's all taken care of with AI and routing. There's humans who can be out there helping.
They all went through the same thing when they got a fax machine, a pager, email, like never had an IT department at City Hall, right? It's almost that step change.
Yeah, I will say, given our experience, I'll just reference our projects here in the Bay Area, in San Jose, in East Contra Costa County. It's been, I think, wonderful to see and inspiring to see as we engage with, from the mayor down to city staff. These are brilliant, dedicated, committed people to solving problems in their areas. I mean, we just have incredible experience. They just really need the tools that we can enable them with to go and do this. But they're working with people in the transit authorities, working with people in the mayor's office, and the mayor down to staff. Once again, brilliant, dedicated people that want to go and improve things. We need to bring them the tools that allow them to do that.
And we need more smart people to go work in public sector.
100%.
Well, maybe then here's another kind of offshoot of this. So let's talk about interoperability between systems, whether this is a catalyst or it's going to be a constraint, because government can actually have a strong influence on how we might be able to share and interoperate with data. And so we all think interoperability, at least at the gut level, makes it feel like this is something we should figure out how to do better together. We all depend on similar data that comes out of the cities, whether it's mapping information or traffic patterns, et cetera. And so, in some places, like for example, China was mandating a consistent map that they were asking the robotaxi companies to use, and they were going to be using a single map that everybody would engage with. So it wasn't every single company building their own map. And this is one of the things they were testing a while back. Where right now here in the United States, we're all kind of on our own. We kind of operate in our own silos. I got to create my map data, someone else creates their map data, et cetera. Is there a world where we have this kind of universal air traffic control? Is this something that government is now getting involved with? Or are systems going to have to basically dynamically interact with each other and do it independently? And maybe to lead this one off, Deborah, because Deloitte has a perspective where you maybe talk to a lot more people and see this across industries. Thoughts on this? Like, is it going to be more like what China's been doing? Or are we going to be doing more like what we're doing? How does interoperability factor into this?
I don't know if you're setting me up when everybody's debating whether their flights are going off tonight or not. But, I don't know. So maybe that was a setup. But we also kind of sort of proved a point. I was listening to everybody answer the question. While everybody was, I think, for interoperability, everybody also answered the question on interoperability in their own voice, which, by the way, proves the point why interoperability doesn't actually really work, because even though we all say interoperability, they all answered it in their own silo. So I think if you actually think about interoperability actually working, and even if you actually think about, yes, we should be talking about awareness, we should be talking about education, states and cities and federal and counties and jurisdictions are all different. Every system is different, every dispatch is different, every data is different. I've worked with every three-letter agency as well. I've been in the field. I used to work with the many different European jurisdictions as well. In intelligence, and yes, people do stupid things, and we should always plan for the stupid things, by the way. I'd rather you plan for the stupid things than the smart things, by the way, because the stupid things are what get us in trouble. I will tell you, I sat and watched somebody at Border Control because the systems didn't work. They had to let go very, very dangerous felons because systems didn't interoperate. So when we think about actual interoperability, yes, is it governments talking between governments? But this was like a county didn't speak to a state, didn't speak to a city, didn't speak to federal, didn't speak to 3 other countries. These aren't easy problems to solve for. And so when I think about like, what are we actually trying to solve for? Yes, it's easy when I sit here and listen to people say, we should all educate people. Yes. But we actually have to pull people together and say, answer the question the same way. Don't have 20 people go speak to your mayor and your congressman 20 different ways for the betterment of your product. We all are trying to make a dime. I mean, corporations are out to make money. Am I right or wrong? That's typically what makes the better sense for what people are going to communicate with. Take off your hats of why you're there communicating with your constituencies and actually talk about the betterment of America or what you're there to actually talk about. Because otherwise, I just don't think we're going to solve the problem. I know that sounds a lot panacea and like, ooh, yay, everybody go do the right thing for what you're there to do. But having 7 people walk in and talk about something, if you're not talking about the same thing, they're equally as confused. Like, I sat there and watched 7 different vendors walk in and talk about interoperability. They all sounded like they could have been speaking 7 different languages. So I just struggle with this word about interoperability and public-private. There has to be public-private cooperation. There has to be interoperability. But we're still not speaking the same language when we talk about what these things actually even mean. So I don't say all that to be like Debbie Downer. It's really hard if we're not actually saying the same things or not actually working in a cohort with the same direction in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point, because I think I've experienced this myself when we're talking about self-driving vehicle technologies, because everyone throws around the word autonomy a lot when it comes to the vehicles, and everyone will admit, 100% autonomous vehicles don't exist. Nobody's built one of those yet, but driving robots do, and various degrees of capability on those driving robots are what the various companies are working on. So I think it's a tricky one, because we all kind of go at it on our own way. You're right. I think it is very true. We kind of speak in our own voices, and outside of like convention, I would say conventions or summit events like this, it's rare you bring everybody together.
And I think it's just hard. It's hard work, and just human nature. Everyone has an ego. Look, it's human nature. Ego is good and bad. Like, how do you get past your ego and human nature and what your corporate bottom line is to be able to talk in definitions that actually have an impact?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other thoughts? I can think of a few events I've gone to that were really well attended with government and ways in which where maybe it forced us to have those conversations where we kind of came together. But any other thoughts from the rest of the team on that kind of the interoperability thing? Are we going to be sharing our data back and forth? Or are we going to find ways to monetize
I don't know.
it
People send me green things on my iPhone. You get texts. I mean, it's an Android versus Apple discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's, as long as you got the basics covered, I don't think you have to make such a big stink about it. Like, some common sense. A lot of issues that she brought up are really important. But do you have to have everything master planned? No. Let the market decide, and then you can decide if you need a blue text or a green text. But I'm not sure this is where the most bang for the buck is for the cities.
Yeah, because I've also been conflicted on that. The example I gave about China having a standardized map for all the robotaxi companies when they were going.
That's scary as hell.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary, but as a company, you're saying, God, am I going to get access to something that's going to allow me to move quicker? It's just going to save me time. It's going to save me work. But if you're contrarian for how you build your system, sometimes that might not be valuable to you, right?
Yep.
And what they provide you might not be sufficient as well. So let's maybe I had a topic here more about when systems collide and stuff, but I think we already talked about that quite a bit during our first topic. So let's maybe move on and talk about the data, because there was a comment even William made earlier when I made the joke about, not even a joke, but I actually saw the Knightscope robots over at Stanford Shopping Center.
We saw you too, I'm telling you.
And there's a permanent record there somewhere in video. So let's talk about data, right? People used to always joke and say data is the new oil. That was a big trend a few years ago. And so you could joke in the cities now, is data the new asphalt, right? Or is this the important part about the cities? So who owns this infrastructure of intelligence? Like this data that we're all going to be throwing off. All these physical AI devices, anything mobile AI that's living in a smart city environment, streams a ton of data. Right? It's going to be visual data from cameras. We're going to get things from LiDARs. We're going to get anything you can grab. We kind of grab right now because it's opportunistic to see how you might use this data. And so, should this data be a private asset that all of us kind of use and monetize amongst ourselves, or is this going to become something that becomes more like a public utility where you can kind of tap into it and use it? And if it becomes the new infrastructure, who's going to guarantee that it's secure and it's being used properly? And maybe I'd figured to start this off with Ben, because I think, Samsaras, this is kind of, you're in this business a little bit.
We got a lot of data.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've got our customers, operating vehicles. They're cities customers. They're private sector, government. And they travel like 90 billion miles a year right now, and growing like really a lot. And so we can map a continent in a few minutes with all major thoroughfares. So we see a lot. And we got trillions of data points we're putting through a back end, because we're not just picking up these petabytes of like video of things going on and stills, but also sensor data, temperature, things like this. And so we're handling a ton of data, and the customers that we sell to, they own that data, that direct data. Now, as we've evolved, we've been at this for a number of years, and so we're realizing there's a lot of benefits for, anonymizing some of that data for that, that other systems can use. So something I touched on earlier, where hey, we can detect the potholes throughout a city of Houston, and say exactly where they are in the last like 10 minutes, and the city can benefit from that, right? And so we found a way the customers are like, yeah, we'll opt in to share any anonymized images, for the betterment of others. Another application we found is just navigating weather risk. Turns out, like, things that get humans in accidents as well as autonomous vehicles accidents is weather. It's like one of the leading causes of accidents. And so, if you have the ability to navigate around immediate understanding of like, oh, there's a flooding over here, there's a flooding alert, message, a vehicle, and let them know what's going on, and or give the operator or an administrator or fleet manager the ability to go and see like, oh, some place where they're about to go to, even though that's not a camera in their vehicle, they're finding tremendous amount of value in that. And so I think the story here is that we've evolved, right? So where it's like customer owns the data, we can understand, and anonymize some of the metrics and use that to help them understand what they can do. But we can also use that data to help their peers operate better, operate safer. People aren't competing in companies on safety, right? They're out there gathering groups like this and sharing tips about how to operate safer, right? I mean, we're reducing like hundreds of thousands of accidents per year, right? And so that's a good use of that data and how we can share it. And I think it's going to continue to evolve, right? It's early days, right? And so there is not a great architect behind how to share data. We'll be waiting a long time for that. And the market is probably the biggest architect of this, and see who wins and who gets adoption and what technologies are the easiest to use and these fun things. But but I think we're in that journey, and we're happy to see that sharing of the data is already starting to happen.
I would add that just something I heard in what you said. I think as you phrased the question, it was, look, who uses this data? Do we use that? Do cities use that? And the beautiful thing about data is it's replicable, effectively on the border of zero cost. And so I think it's more of an and proposition. As we look at the data that we have at Glideways, we've got magnificent data around traffic flows in a city. And we want cities to have that data, and we want to make it easy for them to use that data to most efficiently and effectively address the bottlenecks in their transportation networks by adding new transportation capacity, right? So I think there's every motivation on our part to make it very easy for cities to consume and to use that data to be productive in the ways that we want them to be productive, which is to let's get rid of congestion, let's unblock our bottlenecks in our transportation networks. And so I think you'll see a lot of data sharing because it's in everyone's interest that data is shared and is used to achieve the objectives that we all have, which is to make, use these technologies to make cities smarter, to make them function better.
Yeah. And also just think about, like, this is why we need AI to be so good and software to be so great, because it's just too much data for humans to process, humans to understand, and we need automation, and then that's how we get a great, tremendous leap leveraging this technology. I mean, it's just too much otherwise.
I'll give you the politically correct answer, and then I struggle with the answer. So today all the machine data, like battery cell levels or whatever, charging stuff, LiDAR scans, everything is owned by us. Anything that's physical security, public safety related is owned by the client. With permission, we ask the client if we can use the data for our own training purposes. So contractually, there's a little barrier there, and why I struggle is kind of where Deborah went. The systems across the country for what we're trying to do, and if we're serious about making the U.S. the safest country in the world, you cannot have the FBI publish a most wanted list with an API and have the premier law enforcement agency going on social media going, have you seen this guy? do you know what a level of national embarrassment that is? You can't find this dude? And so part of me, like, when we put the million machines in network, like, we want to hold the record of, yep, every month we got all 10 of them, right? And would that be a better use for society to get those terrorists and arsonists and murderers off the streets than I upset a reporter about the level of privacy associated with the data for what we're trying to do is the greater cause for the nation? Like, that's where I struggle. And I think Congress is struggling with the same perspective. Like, you have all this, but then you're not putting it to good use, is kind of not in the national security interests of the United States of America. Like, maybe you need to rethink this.
I keep wondering when the privacy thing is going to hit us, head on when it comes to what we're doing in the cities right now as well. I remember a few years ago there was a big concern with TSA with the body scanners and everything. Even just last week, I think it was LinkedIn announced that they were going to do some new AI training for their algorithms, and you could see these posts immediately, people telling you how to go turn it off, so you could disable it so they couldn't get your private information. So I think privacy still seems to be an issue here, and I agree with you 100% that if we did this well, the public good would be amazing for being able to catch people, but at the same time, how's the public going to react to the privacy aspect?
But maybe it's not a common answer. For what I'm working on is very different than what's going on over here, right? So maybe for what I'm doing, I mean, we only operate outdoors. We're not in your conference room. We're not in your hotel room. Like, we're not, maybe that's a different use case than, some of the other technologies, and we need to kind of think of it by application.
And I also don't know, I mean, again, I'll pick on the word that, privacy is an issue. I don't actually think, again, that people understand it by use case. I like your framing of by use case of what you're using it for. Because I would debate that people actually don't, again, back to the definition, people don't know what they're saying privacy. Plenty of people are not looking at privacy. They're posting a lot of things out there and they're not actually paying attention to what privacy means. Those same people, by the way, are debating what privacy should or shouldn't be for what data is accessible. So again, I'm not really sure. I mean, I do a lot, again, I look at data that we leverage for space satellites for both criminal activity and non-criminal activity. And by the way, I would agree. Most of the public would not want the criminal activity publicized. We put plenty of information out on news networks that candidly probably shouldn't be out there. Again, very different than what Jimmy Jane or Jimmy Joe was putting out there based on what they partied last night and their employer is looking at. Those same people, by the way, don't understand ramifications of privacy. So it's interesting to me, then I go into Europe and there's signs everywhere. You're in a public place, be forewarned about your privacy due to GDPR requirements. It's very different. And then, oh, by the way, now I'm putting in listening devices in my ear, nondescript, because every device will have it soon, to do translation. Do you notice that there's no disclaimer? I'm eavesdropping on every single one of your conversations. Technically, that's a privacy ramification.
No two-party consent.
Correct. So when you think about, again, definition by privacy, technically, that's a violation of your privacy. So if there's not two-party consent, and I'm in a state that requires two-party consent, is that not a violation of privacy? So I just debate that we're debating the wrong question, when if we're really going to have a conversation about privacy, we should debate what two-party consent actually means, because I'll tell you, technology right now is bending that rule.
So when we led with the question of how do we gain trust, how do we keep trust, what things do we need to be doing, violating people's privacy is something we have to be very, very attentive to. And this is one area, as we look at it, where we absolutely cannot violate trust. I mean, that is an area where you just cannot violate people's trust, where they have an expectation of privacy and you violate that. There are very few things you could do to more rapidly lose trust.
And to be clear, I use every single one of the technology devices. I don't say any of those reasons because I don't. I am so tech-enabled, it's not even funny. But I'll have on the glasses and I walk into the bathroom, a public bathroom, and people have no idea if I'm wearing glasses that are taking pictures of anybody in a bathroom. So I say it so people are more socially aware of the environment that we were walking into, not because I'm against the environment that we're in.
Yeah. And I think I agree. This comes back to almost the thread that we had earlier a little bit on education, where how do people understand what these things are really doing? Because even at Faction, we were doing driverless delivery last year in Houston, Texas. We were partnering with Chick-fil-A on this to kind of go out and do deliveries. And so it was kind of funny because we were told to be prepared that if a driverless vehicle goes into a neighborhood, people are going to get upset because there's cameras on it. And certain neighborhoods were getting very upset about the robo-taxis that have been testing in Houston. But the funny part is we didn't get any negative impact because we were bringing them chicken sandwiches and lemonade and things like that. So I think it gets back to like, what are people comfortable with and what are they getting out of these systems?
You know how to fix it? We went through this drama multiple times. One particular real estate developer in Florida was like, so I want the security robot to patrol these 350 single-family residences. Okay, great. I think you should tell the HOA and like no, don't need to do that. No, I think you really, no, don't need to do that. And this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes clients don't listen. Put the robot there, everything that you could possibly imagine. You're in my wife's watching movies, you're surveilling what she's watching, like every possible thing that negative that could come out of that situation came out of that circumstance. So what we started doing afterwards was forcing as best we could some manners and etiquette, which is basically introduce yourself. I don't care if you have the robot lunch, the lunch and learn, the naming contest, the come and meet the robot, bring the kids. I don't care what newsletter, Instagram, website. I don't care what it is. You need to introduce yourself before you show up. Simple manners and etiquette will fix the problem. Because then after you explain what the technology does, why it's here, all in favor, aye. Right? But if you don't do that, you're going to have problems.
So I'm keeping an eye on our time a little bit because I want to leave a little bit of room. We had some time scheduled for Q&A for the panel. But there's one question I want to end with, which was kind of tied back to this being an AI summit. And this is probably a little bit of a loaded question because there's a lot of different opinions on it and levels of technology. But because we get asked this all the time, especially when you're operating in roads, so like how much freedom does a robot have? And so the question is really around, can a robot break the rules to do the right thing? And if we have a physical AI agent or robot that's out in the world there, and it needs to cross a barrier to prevent an accident, or let's say one of the patrol bots has to override a boundary to assist in an emergency, let's say if you had some capability to that or do something, should they be allowed to do it? And then most importantly, is this an AI decision that's allowed to be made, right? So is it going to be between an AI having a free, make a logic decision on it, versus something that's the right choice? I'll give an example that always comes up with self-driving vehicles, and this is a big rat hole question around this because it's been going on for a number of years. But people trying to say how to do a cost analysis if a vehicle has to swerve to avoid a child in the road. Is it okay to purposely hit an oncoming vehicle to know that the oncoming vehicle has more protection for the occupants, right? But then you get into these judgment values, like are we really going to trust a robot to make that cost analysis? And are we going to, as people, are going to do it, allow it? I know very simply right now, for most of us doing self-driving vehicles, if you go ask the captain of the California Highway Patrol if you're allowed to go with flow of traffic versus always staying at the speed limit, you know the answer. Yeah, we have to drive the speed limit, right? But what does the future mean like for any of us, for our other systems? Like, are we going to allow these robots to break the rules at times? And how much is AI going to play into this versus staying within a framework that is a little more rigid? And I may open this up to the group, but so if anybody has any thoughts on this, because this being AI Summit, there's going to be a lot of discussions around supervised learning versus unsupervised, and how do these things,
So you're asking if robots going to have common sense or not?
Or can you program it, or even if you were to allow it to have certain things, would you allow one of your robots to do something that is not?
Okay, but aren't we going around in a circle? You used all the data from the humans to train the robots. The humans break the rules and have common sense. So therefore, by the pigeonhole principle, wouldn't the robot just do what the humans do?
But we know AI really doesn't have any judgment, though. And it lacks taste if you look at a lot of the videos and images too, right?
This is a true statement.
Yeah.
No, I think you inserted kind of an operable point there, which is how we've kind of answered this question currently. I mean, if you go head up to San Francisco right now, you're going to see dozens of Waymos driving around, and they take certain liberties because this is required. If you are going to not if you're going to deploy that number of vehicles in San Francisco and not bring San Francisco traffic to a halt, you have to drive in the way that humans drive. You have to take those certain liberties that you're expected to take. And so certain liberties are taken, but there are lines that don't get crossed, and there's a remote operator on the other side of that who's brought in for decision making when it comes to a certain level beyond the kind of common liberties that are taken. So I think that's the current state of the art. That line can continue to push as these systems become more and more capable, I would expect. But we kind of do this currently by doing exactly what you suggested, which is we bring in human judgment where human judgment is required to make these types of decisions. And then we understand that laws are written for humans with common sense. And so if we want to deploy robots into that world with laws that are written for humans with common sense, they have to be able to take certain liberties that people would take associated with navigating that environment in a way that's fluent. That is the way that humans would operate that environment. Otherwise, that environment becomes non-functional. If it's nothing but strict interpretation of you can never go around that double parked truck into the other lane and come back around, right? It can't possibly work according to strict definitions.
Yeah, I'm glad Waymo bends the rules a little bit. Otherwise, I'm able to get around town and the city because I live there. So yeah.
And we use human in the loop at Faction as well for this stuff too, it's for supervised autonomy. But I think I think one of the things that's going to, there will be other discussion, I'm sure, at other panels at this summit as well, is that how much leeway do you give an AI system over time as these things evolve? And I was told by someone who's been working on these types of systems for a while now, that they were actually trying to build a predictive system into their autonomous vehicles where if they were getting passed by a car on one side and a motorcycle on the other, they're going to let their AI system determine the probability of an accident happening 30 seconds in the future, and they would start to adjust the vehicle's speed so they wouldn't get involved in the accident. And as a motorcyclist, I'm listening to this, I'm like, please don't, right? And that vehicle has actually brake checked a couple motorcyclists already and caused accidents because they're trying to predict the future with an AI system. And generally, when you're being passed, you want to be predictable. You don't want to actually change your trajectories. But people are working on this stuff. People are going to try to think about, can they break the rules? And I agree with everyone's statements where I like when Waymo breaks the rules on occasion. But Waymo's also done some very nice little things too. I was riding in a Waymo where it was blocking the crosswalk and the light turned red and actually rolled back 10 feet. We don't do that on Faction vehicles yet. I looked at it, I was like, that's slick. It was really, really well done, right? So they're also trying to model that.
And I think part of the challenge is, we were designing some multimodal systems for some autonomous work, and the challenge is it doesn't know the difference between certain things. So as an example, it doesn't know the difference between 18th century art and child pornography, regardless of the guardrails you put up. So, you don't want your autonomous food delivery to not know the difference between those two things.
Yes.
Because you could understand if you're producing, ads on the side for it to creatively come up with something from 18th century art that might be a nude photo and all of a sudden it blend child pornography with that could be a bad outcome. And yes, that did actually happen, so we have to actually think about what that would be, even though guardrails were built in to avoid nudity. Because the AI thought that 18th century art would have been fantastic. Well, the AI actually thought that, so its brain didn't realize that pornography was also similarly the same. So again, I do think you have to think about, even with guardrails and even understanding what a guardrail was. Now, interestingly enough, it tried to blur it because that was our guardrail, so it was blurred. So the AI thought that it was learning, that blurring it was actually the safety feature. So it's actually interesting, and actually back to our whole conversation around the human in the loop. The human in this instance, the client, actually was like, take the whole system out, we're done. They panicked, 2 o'clock in the morning, they're panicking. Take the whole system. I'm like, let's learn from this and learn what we can do. And instead, then they were like, let's take out 18th century art. I'm like, I don't think you're learning. No. I think you missed the point. That's not the point. And so again, I still think that there's what AI actually learns and how those guardrails can still keep us from moving forward while predicting the scenarios. So again, you still have to figure out how you can actually help it learn.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank everyone for the participation in the panel, and we're going to transition quickly. I think we have at least a few minutes left for Q&A. And I see a hand up, but I also know that we've got curated questions too, a little bit of both. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to take questions from the audience or hit your curated ones. Okay. And we can hear you because you're close. So.
Great. I want to thank you all for this fascinating conversation. Each one of you are just spectacular people for this conversation. I want to especially commend you, William, because I was so skeptical about this idea of robots will be everywhere that I was like, I think I'm going to leave the room. Because I was like, oh my God, this dystopian future, what is the world coming to? But I was totally convinced by your story that this could make a huge, massive positive impact on not only our nation, but the world. So I was raised in the Bay Area, but I live in Iceland, the safest country in the world. So my question to you is that, are you already looking beyond the layers that you're already creating of these vehicles, and which I think is going to be, very effective, but are you already kind of, because I was thinking about Iceland, my imagination going there, imagining these vehicles helping people feel safer, not that there's much crime, but are you imagining that there are ways to protect, for example, people from domestic violence or violence that goes on behind doors? Is there something that's going on in terms of development for the next, a deeper layer?
I've got about 3 decades worth of workload in my head, primarily focused on business to business and business to government first, primarily outdoors, and business to consumer or anything indoors is a whole other planet. From a business standpoint and a technology standpoint, we're looking at more focused on having an arsenal is probably the wrong word, a very large portfolio of technologies, because securing the underpass of a bridge is very different than securing a federal courthouse, is very different than securing a military base, and you cannot have one widget, this one robot's going to fix everything. It doesn't make any sense. So Northrop Grumman should only make one type of military device. Doesn't make any sense, right? So we're going to have extra, extra small up through extra, extra large of air, land, and sea, plus humans to do this properly. So what I'm envisioning is probably a $30 billion company that looks like a defense contractor, but instead is focusing actually on our own soil.
And I'm going to reference one of the actually, we have 2 questions here around this topic, and this is going to tie it back a little bit to Tech Equity, who's sponsoring AI Summit. And I may paraphrase these a little bit because they overlap, but the questions really center around, with the current, political and economic climate, how does the smart city, which has historically, maybe missed some underrepresented communities, make these types of technologies available to everybody, especially people maybe in underserved areas? Because I think the comment was made earlier, we live in a little bit of a bubble sometimes, especially in Silicon Valley. But how do we make these types of technologies available so that it's inclusive and everyone kind of gets a chance to benefit from it in the smart city environment?
Yes, this is one area that we at Glideways in particular are very excited about. And we've got a project in Atlanta around the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport that connects into existing transit in the Atlanta area, which is not as equitably distributed as certainly the region would like it to be. And it's very difficult for them to change that fact given the cost and expense of current solutions for mass transit systems. So bringing this technology in that allows the Atlanta region to affordably and scalably build out their transit network allows them to extend into these areas that previously, historically, have been underserved. And so this is something we focus a lot of time and energy on. We talked about a little bit our project in East Contra Costa County. This is servicing an area in the Bay Area. I mean, nothing's affordable from a housing perspective, but it's more affordable out in Pittsburgh and Antioch and Brentwood and Oakley than it is here. And so it's one of the most rapidly growing areas in the Bay Area, but they also have the longest commute in the United States. Right? And so being able to deploy this technology to service those areas and bring down that commute, I mean, it's just a tremendous opportunity. As we leverage this technology to bring costs down, we can democratize access to things where really access was not as equitably distributed as we would like it to be.
Yeah, and I think I'll add on to that. If you're an entrepreneur, I don't know, maybe there's some entrepreneurs here, I'm not sure. But if you want to make money, you got to get outside Silicon Valley, right? And you got to go to where people are, where the users are. And so turns out, U.S. is a great market. All of North America is a great market. Europe's a great market. And that's where we are. And we see in all these locations, and you got to go where the people are, right? So we're able to bring technology using AI, using all kinds of cool devices, and really affect lives everywhere. And whether it's helping companies be more efficient with the resources, they can employ more, like finding more leverage out of that. Like our customers are employing people all over the place. So I'm visiting customers in like Arkansas, Oklahoma, just anywhere. And that's where people are. The United States, you go to Mexico, go to Canada, or in England, we're, everywhere. So, and you find that, that the world of physical operations, it employs like a ton of folks, right? And so this is just from an entrepreneurial perspective, an excellent opportunity for people to go out, have change, which should translate to some kind of commercial success.
Completely agree. I mean, one of the most exciting projects I'm working on is one outside of Fargo with the indigenous community. One of their highest fatality rates is around women in childbirth and not being able to get to, they will not come out of the community due to cultural reasons for hospital care, and the nearest hospitals are outside of 60 to 120 miles in radius. So we're actually using drones and autonomous vehicles and working with the hospital communities and translators and individuals from the indigenous communities and entrepreneurs to actually build out systems to be able to utilize these, actually also from the government, because a lot of these systems have been already built for the government, and yet the hospitals weren't actually working with the government to be able to utilize these systems. So it's been a great way to bring together communities that wouldn't otherwise have been working with one another to get them out there. And I'm super proud because we've actually been able to bring up the mortality rate in the last 3 years in this very specific indigenous community. And now we're going to actually roll it out to 3 other indigenous communities in 2026. So I couldn't agree with you more. Get out to communities, do more, learn what is their pain points, because there are absolutely ways. All the challenges that we've talked about, yes, everybody's listening, privacy issues, all these other things, great, we can be in a bunker, get whatever you need to do, but we will not solve these problems if not for AI, if not for technology, and if not for the opportunity provided for us. So get out there and learn what other people's problems are, because they're vast and they need to be solved for.
Yeah, the opportunities in the transition.
Yes.
We all think about, the future's going to look like this, right? Everything's autonomous, or robots walking around helping elderly. It's like getting everyone to that point. That's the opportunity right now. That's what we have to work on. Understanding the use cases, figuring out how to have some incremental impact, and if you're a small company, feeding yourself to get to the next level. So that's what I think. That's really, I think, one of the key messages I want to deliver.
Yeah, I'm gonna maybe. I was going to say I was just going to pile on, and well, maybe you can make a final comment on there as well. It's like the same thing. We went through the same evolution at Faction, where we were building self-driving vehicles that purposely were trying to get under $20,000 per system, because it's kind of what the market would bear. How do you do truly like a $5 delivery kind of thing? But we were, originally looking at California economics, and we're seeing what it costs to kind of do last mile delivery in California. We did a massive pilot in Houston, Texas, about a year ago, where we were constantly reminded that the minimum wage there is not $20 an hour, but it's $7 an hour. And so if you're going to make a product that works for the entire middle of the country, you can't put a California lens on it. And so I'll second the other comments. You got to get out of Silicon Valley. You got to get out of the bubble we live in, and actually enjoy that, because it helps you refine your products and do a better job.
Go to Mexico. It's amazing. Like we're solving that hijacking case, real time. It's kind of nuts.
I think you hit a price that makes it accessible. An off-duty law enforcement officer armed is about $85 an hour. A guard is between $25 and $65 an hour. So if you're a community, like, how are you going to, you're struggling with your base budget. Now you got to add this supplemental. The robots are, $11 an hour. Like, okay, that makes it a lot more accessible to communities that otherwise wouldn't even look at adding that kind of technology.
Yeah, totally agree. It's got to work for everybody. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and keep us on schedule for our panel here. I'd personally like to say thank you to everybody for participating. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate your participation.